All right, guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of the CX Chronicles Podcast. Super excited for today's show, guys. We have Evan Klein joining us from Satrix Solutions. He is got some incredible experience in the CX and the EX game, voice of customer reporting and task forcing. Super pumped, Evan, to hear your story. Why don't you start off today's show like we start off all these episodes? Say hello to the CX Nation and give us a sense for how'd you get into this whole world, man? How'd you get into the CX game and working with all these different companies, helping them think about voice of customer, employee experience, and all the fun stuff that we think about every day?
Yeah, awesome. Adrian, thanks for having me. Great to be here and great to speak with everyone. How far back do you want me to go?
I want you to set the stage, my friend. I think one of my favorite parts about this question, Evan, is it's awesome for up and coming CX and CSers and just customer focused business leaders to hear like the stepping stones, hear how people kind of got up their own ladder and set their own journey. So as far back as you're willing to share, my friend.
Yeah, quasi Stone Age. No, but we'll take it back to graduating college longer ago than I care to admit. And actually, most of my jobs since graduating were in service-based businesses. So I was largely on the front lines. I was in some cases in leadership roles, but by and large, I was responsible for high-touch consultative practices, which often were the company's core offering. And in all of the cases, essentially, there were other products and services that had to be sold into that account. So we were sort of the lead-in for higher margin software products and other solutions that were sold into those businesses. So I don't think your listeners would be surprised to hear that I learned quickly that if clients weren't happy with the experience that we were providing, then and the value they were experiencing, then we had little hope of engaging them for other products and services. And since that was such a key driver of revenue growth and profitability, we had to be darn good at what we were doing to maximize our opportunity with those accounts. So, really early in my career, I was exposed to concepts that are being talked a lot more about and a lot more focused today: customer lifetime value, upsell, cross-sell, customer-led growth. These were, big focus areas of ours, even though we weren't maybe calling them by name. But it was a big strategic endeavor undertaken by a lot of the companies I worked for. So then, sort of fast forward into 2002, I was put in a leadership role running a consulting practice at Thomson Reuters. Now Thomson Reuters. At the time, it was just Thomson Corp. And I started out with a strong interest in having real finger on the pulse of customer experience and employee engagement. So we really started and set out for on a number of programs to make sure we had a deep understanding of how those two constituents felt, how the satisfaction levels were changing, and based on the refinements and improvements that we were making, how things were trending over time. So that gave me great visibility into, the impact of an improved service experience on revenue and profits. And one of the measures of success, and I alluded to this a moment ago, was the increase in spend across those accounts. So happy clients certainly expanded their engagement with us more often, and they were buying more higher margin products and services. So that was a key KPI for us at many of these organizations. After Thomson, I relocated to Scottsdale, Arizona, and I took on a role at a digital agency in town as the head of client satisfaction. So in that role, I wasn't in a leadership position. It was more an individual contributor, but I owned CX, and it was a company that was, frankly, leaky bucket syndrome. They were really good at selling, but not as great at retaining. And so we put in a number of programs into place, things like client advisory board, sales win-loss, churn analysis, net promoter. I was actually an early adopter of net promoter because this was around 2006, just a few years after it was launched. And so, I really got firsthand visibility into how these programs impacted the business in a positive way. And then 2008, some of you might remember the Great Recession. I was politely asked to leave the organization in the third round of layoffs with a number of other colleagues. And instead of sprucing up my resume, I decided to hang a shingle. And I founded Satrix Solutions, and really wanted to apply what I've learned for that 10 or 15 years prior in the world of customer experience and employee engagement, and offer those services to B2B companies. So that's what led me to Satrix Solutions. And here we are 14 years later, doing that for a lot of B2B businesses.
I love it. So number one, Evan, thank you for sharing that. Number two, selfishly, I was like pumped to hear your story because a couple of things. Number one, just there's so many CX and CS leaders out there that they spend time at one company, maybe two companies, and they have a pretty good sense of what's going on within those businesses. But when you have an opportunity to work at a number of different shops with a number of different teams, a number of different customer bases, different products, different services, your ability to help any company really understand their customer journey, really understand their voice of customer, the voice drumbeat or the voice pulse, whatever you guys are calling it, man, it makes it really, really, it makes it so much easier to begin to go into any company and start to see some of the key variables, some of the strengths, some of the weaknesses, some of the opportunities and the threats, but also you kind of get a flavor and a taste for how hard some of these different customer facing roles are. I love that you immediately brought up the notion of like, man, when you're dealing with customers and you're dealing with really being like the manager of an account, this is hard work, right? You've got so many different things going on. You're doing business with people, even if you're doing business with really large entities, really large companies. At the end of the day, guys, it's all about doing business with people, building relationships, understanding what's working, what's not working. And what's awesome about your story, Evan, you were doing this before all of these, modern SaaS companies. Now you talk about, net revenue retention, net dollar retention. Everybody's thinking about churn mitigation or churn benchmarks around what's good, what's bad, and then leaky bucket. Forget about it. Most companies, you're absolutely right. They get really, really good at maybe going from 0 to 5 million without always stopping and looking back and saying, wait a minute, what are we losing? What's in the wake? So I love that's really kind of how you started your journey. And I think it's just so awesome, some of the work that you guys have been doing at Satrix. So with that, let's jump into the first pillar. I'd love for you to kind of talk about your team over at Satrix. And I'd love for you to talk about not only how you kind of built your squad and how you kind of built some of the different roles and positions, but I'd love for you to talk about some of the things you've learned about all the teams that you've worked with and consulted with, because you've gotten to see some really, really cool companies. Spend a few minutes talking about team, Evan.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I want to comment on a point you made a moment ago. Having worked at probably more companies than I should have, because
that's a good thing, man. That's a good thing.
Well, Silicon Valley. I was in San Francisco for the the .com boom and then the .com bust. So when you're in environments like that and you see the ups and downs, you're forced to sort of jump around either by your choice or by the companies that you work for choice. So definitely had a lot of exposure to different businesses, and I think, to your point, what that enables you to do is see, which company leadership teams pay lip service to customer experience and which ones really walk the walk.
Yep, 100%.
There are a lot of companies that say, they'll have it on their website. They'll talk about how important it is. We really care about our customers. And when it comes to it, though, they don't back that up internally by really having the formal processes in place or the muscle memory or the methodology to act on the insights and really drive the business forward in that regard. So you're able to make that distinction between business leaders who truly do care and are fully committed to it versus those who maybe just talk about it more. And that, definitely brings us into the companies that we work with today, the key ingredients for success, because that's clearly one of them. Buy-in at the leadership level, full in commitment. We work with some companies that, when we do a readout, the entire extended leadership team is on. There's root cause discussion. There's, banter around, what we're going to do. How are we going to action this? Well, how are we going to prioritize? How are we going to invest? And then there's other companies that, frankly, don't take it as seriously. So I think there's been great visibility into that. But as it relates to the team at Satrix Solutions, we're a boutique services firm. So pretty small shop, but that gives us the opportunity to really deliver an exceptional service experience.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the things we hire for, are people who are really passionate about customer service, customer experience. We have to deliver at a very high level. Otherwise, who's going to take us seriously considering the services that we offer, right?
100%.
It would be the height of irony if we were falling down on the job and not delivering a differentiated service experience. So that's first and foremost, are people that are really committed to that, very detail-oriented, very passionate, very high EQ or emotional intelligence. That's obviously a big factor for us. And then, we have essentially, the organization is split into two groups. One of those is the sort of people who've been there, done that. who've been around the block, who've worked inside companies in customer experience roles, and who can bring that sort of understanding and consultative nature to our clients. So that's the frontline team. And then we have the reporting and analytics team. So these are more of the numbers folks, the people who are really good at data, mathematics, statistics, good with Excel, good with PowerPoint, who help bring forward all of the insights and learnings for the benefit of our clients. So those are the two teams. Then we, of course, have marketing. And then there's what I do, which some days I'm sure, some days I'm not. But, evangelist, sales, and a host of other roles.
Doing many things, I imagine. Many things on all the different days.
Juggling a lot of balls.
So wait, real quick. So before we jump off this, I think number one, what you talked about with having the two different focus areas, you have your customer facing side and client facing side. They're probably listening, learning, understanding all the different things that are going on within a client's world. But then the second piece that you mentioned, the analytical piece, the data science piece, just the data governance and cleanliness and organization piece. This is the thing that so many growth companies struggle with, because they might have a phenomenal guy or gal who's leading the portfolio or leading the customer book of business. But if they don't necessarily have some of that operative support, right, and they don't have somebody that can help them think about how to piece together the numbers, piece together what some of the data is suggesting, help them storytell on what the numbers are saying, man, it's hard to get executive buy-in. It's hard to get, in a position where you can constantly push the ball forward. The minute you marry those two worlds, where you have the people, the guys and the gals that understand the customer, they understand the user, what they love, what they hate, but then they also have that numbers and the math backing it up. Now you're starting to cook with gas. And I think that a lot of CX and CS leaders that we have on the show and that are in our community, this is a big thing they struggle with, man. It's really difficult sometimes until you get to a certain point or a certain level of maturation at a business to be able to have those resources, have that knowledge, have that expertise. And honestly, guys, when you can just work with someone like Evan and his team in Satrix, and you have somebody that's been there, done that, built multiple reports, worked with multiple tools, seen all the different ways that you can set up your leading, your lagging indicators, understand how to maybe prioritize. I know with us, Evan, a lot of the client work that we do, we'll look at these KPI metrics lists that are 25, 50, maybe even 100 different lines long. And the first thing we say is, wait a minute, number one, what are the 5 things that are the most relevant, the most important, have the biggest bang for your buck? And then number 2, how are you guys calculating or measuring these other 100? Because so many companies, they want to get more and more and more indicators or more and more signals or more and more variables. But man, sometimes that's hard to keep track. Figure out what the top 5, the top 10 things are that's actually going to, well, number one, increase your sales and make sure that you're driving the business forward. But you mentioned the customer satisfaction and the customer sentiment piece. You got to make sure that you're building products and services that people want, they enjoy, they find the value in, and that's really where you begin to get some of your retention from. So I absolutely love that. Before we jump off of team, Evan, I want to ask, what are like 1 or 2 things that you've seen from all the clients that you've worked with and even your team? What are like 1 or 2 things that you want our listeners to kind of think about when it comes to building and scaling and leading a team? I'd love to just kind of have like 1 or 2, nuggets of wisdom from all the different projects and all the different work that you've done.
Yeah, it's a good question. I alluded to this a moment ago. I'm really big on the notion of emotional intelligence. I think for anyone who does the things that we do, that's an area to really lean into. And there's been books written about this, right? That you can't really develop your IQ, but you can develop your EQ. And I think, for people who are on the front lines, for people who are really focused on customer experience or customer success, it's about, self-awareness, right? It's about empathy, strong social skills, great listening skills. When I have hired at Satrix or even at companies prior to founding Satrix Solutions, that was an area that we focused on. And whether we knew it was EQ or not, or whether we defined it or not, we knew that those were some of the attributes, some of the skill sets that we were looking for, because that's ultimately what helps to develop these exceptional client relationships that you have, where if you're really in deep with your customer, if you're really listening to their challenges and problems, understanding their objectives, interacting with them at a high level, that's fueling retention and growth opportunities within those accounts. So that's certainly an area that from a team perspective that we emphasize quite a bit.
I love it, man. I love it. It's so true. Your ability to be able to listen, but then to also the empathy piece you mentioned, that's massive, man. And that's why I think for modern customer focused business leaders, having a blend of that IQ and that EQ, it's imperative. Like you have to have it, and you have to. One other piece, and I know that you spent a ton of time thinking and talking and working on the EX side of the game, the employee experience, but I also think that for leaders, people that can listen to not only their customers, but they can listen exceptionally well to their teams, and they can take the good, the bad, the ugly, they can build from it, they can develop calls to action from it, they can train, coach, and socialize all this knowledge. Those are going to be teams that are not only happy, but you have to have happy teams to be able to go deliver incredible customer experiences to your customer base. So I love it. All awesome ideas. Evan, I'd love to jump into the second CX pillar of tools. Spend a couple minutes talking about not only the tools that you and your team are using at Satrix, but I imagine you guys probably see a lot of different pieces of technology with your clients. I know that tools is also a big there's so many different surveys and reports out there where a lot of CX and CS leaders of the four pillars, they struggle with tools because number one, there's all these different possibilities out there, right? There's so many different types of tools. It can be overwhelming, but utilization is a real challenge in many organizations. So just because you have Salesforce or just because you have Zendesk or just because you have Gainsight, are you using it well, right? Is your company using it well? So I'd love to kind of have you spend a couple of minutes talking about some of the things that you've seen over the years in your work around how companies have used tools, how your team has used tools, and maybe a couple ideas around some of the things that our listeners can kind of take back to their teams and their businesses around managing their tech stack and managing all the different pieces of technology they have.
Yeah, I was smiling when you said, are they using it well? Partially because I think that's, one of the interesting dynamics of the survey software that's available to all of us today. And we use an enterprise level survey software platform to field surveys on behalf of our clients. Sometimes that means the clients don't need to have a survey software platform themselves. They'll use ours. And sometimes they have internal tools that we might use, and they'll give us the keys and we'll field their survey that way. But I was smiling around how they're used is because sort of this democratization of survey software tools, that started with SurveyMonkey probably, 15, 20 years ago or something, is a double-edged sword. Because, what they make claims of, and understandably, they're really good at marketing, that these tools can do everything for you. They'll help you with the questionnaire, they'll help you with maximizing response rates, and they'll help you with analysis and interpretation. And reality is that they probably aren't doing some of those things as well. And unfortunately, I think people are heavily reliant upon these tools and assume that, despite the fact that they don't have an extensive amount of experience, they could just license a tool and get it all done and do it right. And so I think that's one of the risk factors associated with all these great tools. Something to your point a moment ago is if you're not using it right, there's a lot of risk in that you may be sending your organization in the wrong direction. You may be acting on data that's not actually representative or trustworthy of your overall customer sentiment. So just something to point out for your listeners is to be wary about, because that's something that could potentially harm your business.
And it's expensive, Evan, too. Some of this stuff, when you have companies using or not using their tools, it's expensive, and there's an opportunity cost to your point right here, which is like, it can be distracting, right? If you have 27 different tools and your employees know how to use 2 of them, the other 20 plus tools become distracting, and there's an opportunity cost around where you really want your team and your customer information, where you want it going, and then how you're going to pull some of that reporting out. So 100% agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and we use the survey software tool. We use dashboarding tools on behalf of our clients, so we give them visualizations in real time. We use some text analytics tools, although a lot of the work that we do in that regard is what we call human-centered, right? Analyzing and coding open-ended feedback in response to the surveys that we're fielding. We use transcription software because we're doing a lot of in-depth phone interviews or in-depth interviews on Zoom, and then we have that tool to help us transcribe the interviews for our clients. But our clients, of course, are using a lot of different tools in their tech stack, their customer success tool, often support tools or help desk type tools, internal communication tools, sales intelligence tools, competitive intelligence tools. So yeah, there are a lot, and that we have to, important for our business, think about how we can, and I say integrate with quotes, but feed our insights and information into all of those tools, like ingesting the customer survey data into the CRM, into Salesforce, into the account record, so that that can be tracked and trended over time, or into the CS tool, or making sure that we're thinking about the competitive intelligence that we're gleaning on behalf of our clients and feeding that through Crayon, for example, CI tool. So we have to be able to adapt to all of our clients' different tech stacks and make sure that we're thinking about the unique ways that they're using these tools and how we can maximize the impact of the work that we're doing by leveraging those tools.
I love it. And it makes me think, and I know you're gonna jump into some of the different ideas that you have around really building an incredible voice of customer, not just a culture, but you need the reporting to drive the culture, to drive the team, to be able to drive debate and conversation, and to develop calls to actions, or to develop growth objectives that your team can actually divide and conquer on. But one of the things that I see constantly with so many different CX and CS leaders is, because of the abundance of tools, they're not necessarily aggregating all of this information, or aggregating all those signals, or aggregating all the data. They might have sales and revenue reporting coming out of Salesforce. They might have their support and their ticketing or their issue resolution data coming out of Zendesk. But I think a lot of companies, until they get to a certain level, that stuff's hard to be able to blend that together, bring it into a BI tool, normalize some of the data, make it easier to understand and comprehend, right? Because not everybody gets this stuff in the first shot. And then I think what most customer leaders realize is, like, your ability to storytell is contingent upon what type of information is right in front of your team, or right in front of your fingertips, especially on the executive side, right? If you're not reporting on certain things that your executive team cares about, it might be kind of tough to get some of the things done, right? Like you have to be thoughtful around that. So, but I'd love to dive into the third pillar, process. You do all this incredible work on voice of customer. Definitely spend a few minutes talking about, number one, just how you think about VOC. And I'd love for you to kind of maybe share an example or so around how you're working with teams to kind of develop their VOC approach, whether that's by way of just like the team aspect, Evan, where how do you get the right SMEs around the table to actually start having meaningful conversations? And then I'd love to hear some of your ideas and thoughts around the reporting aspect. How do you build reporting dashboards, visibility sets that makes it possible to start to tell that story across the whole business?
Yeah. And process is so important in the work that you do. And I think, companies who are just sort of scratching the surface or winging it, don't have a formal process or approach to their VOC program. And again, I think that's a risk. And that's something, we've developed over almost 15 years of business, having that sort of rigor and that muscle memory, that understanding of how to execute. But with that, also leaving room, because every company is different. So you have to leave room for tailoring or customizing based on that company's unique needs or objectives. But we have a proven approach and methodology to everything we do. So take, for example, your customer satisfaction survey or net promoter score, which usually is embedded within a relationship survey. Every step of the process has to be thought through. And you're talking about survey design, right? Thinking about exactly how you're going to design the survey to unearth the most meaningful and actionable insights for the company. So there's a discovery process that's involved, making sure you're collecting feedback from internal constituents. You have all the people's voices documented. Then you go into the design process. Then you want to make sure you have good data. I know you've talked a lot about this, making sure that your customer data is up to date, accurate, fresh. It also has the associated metadata with it so that you can do a lot of slicing and dicing on the back end. And then you're doing the administration of the survey, where you have to get good quality response rates. If you don't get robust response rates, then the data isn't representative or reliable. So processes in all of these phases, and then into the reporting and analytics, and making sure that we're bringing forward and distilling down the most valuable insights that can be actioned on behalf of the management team. And you spoke about this as well, making sure that you're telling a compelling story. Ultimately, when you have a lot of data from, for example, a customer survey, You have a lot of quantitative data, a lot of qualitative feedback. You have to organize it in a way that makes sense and is going to compel action on behalf of the executives. They understand what they're seeing. They understand where the opportunities are, where the risks are, and they're prioritizing accordingly. So there really does have to be a formalized process there throughout every step of any VOC or employee engagement program. And planning and sort of project management is a big part of it as well.
100% agree. I mean, so many companies, they think, okay, we have a super high NPS. How many responses do you have? 100. How long have you been in business? 5 years. Okay, good. Like, we have some feedback, but that sample, I don't know. I don't know if I would bet the farm on that type of a sample. It might give you directional sense. It might give you, to your point, you're going to get some quantitative, some qualitative, but you really need to be mindful of sort of how to think about, you're spot on with survey design, but also who are you sending this stuff to? There's so many companies where they'll send these mass surveys to a broad base without thinking about, maybe just to give our listeners example, but maybe there is an executive lens, maybe there is a management lens, maybe there's a boots on the ground, customer facing front row lens. There really is a tremendous amount of gain from thinking about how you can segment some of that different feedback and segment the way that you're looking at who feels what type of way, right? Because so many companies, they kind of look at it as like a hodgepodge of all these different responses and all these different pieces of feedback. But you really do need to be thoughtful and mindful about how you want to design that, especially once you start to scale, and especially once you start to see a tremendous amount of feedback. And I love that you're already kind of painting some of the pictures around the ideas, but NPS, customer satisfaction, customer effort scoring, product satisfaction, it can go deep, it can go wide. And honestly, it's hard work, frankly, to be able to take all that feedback, segment it, compartmentalize it, create buckets, create tags, however you guys are doing it. That takes time as well. And honestly, having somebody that's done it multiple times, it makes it a lot easier to paint a cleaner picture for your business and for your portfolio.
Evan, and I think just to highlight something you said, because it's a key distinction in B2B versus the consumer world, where you have, to your point, different stakeholders. You have the decision maker or budget owner, you have influencers, you have subject matter experts, you have users, and understanding the variation maybe in the sentiment across those different groups inside the one account, right, or the one customer is vital. So you can't really just roll it up and say, here's the net promoter score for that account. You have to look at the component parts, because it's not unusual for a user or a set of users to have a very different point of view or different satisfaction levels than a decision maker might, or a budget owner or an influencer. So to your point, making sure you have that data and you can identify those different personas or contact roles, and soliciting feedback from them, and then analyzing them in an entirety, but also in component parts, segmenting them so that you can really see where the opportunities and the risks are present.
So I love that you bring this up, because it's one thing to have a portfolio of customers where you think you're killing it with your executive engagement. Okay, good, because you're right. They're going to be the guys and gals with the budget and with that are going to create the renewal or create the expansion. But not if you have everyone on their team hates the product, hates the service, doesn't use it, utilization rate super, super low. That becomes hard for that executive sponsor or champion to go ahead and get the next contract, get the next renewal, want the next 100 seats, right? That's a totally different thing. Evan, I want to talk about for a second, like the idea of some of the things that you've seen with playbooks or SOPs, or some of the ways that you've seen companies do a brilliant job of capturing all of the different things that are happening within a business, whether it's through an LMS or a playbook. How have you seen some of the best companies and the best clients you've worked with really do a great job of chronicling that information and then being able to share it, socialize it, and expand tribal knowledge within a business or within a customer set too? Because on the playbook side, some companies are doing a brilliant job of creating FAQs and knowledge sets that work internally and externally for employees and for customers. Spend a minute talking about what you've seen with like playbooks and the way that companies are really kind of evolving the way they manage their SOPs.
Yeah, and so for us, particularly on the VOC side, all of that is so essential, right? Is to have an understanding before you get into it as it relates to how you close the loop. And so what we do is we help our clients develop playbooks for that those activities because they're so central to a successful customer experience program. I'm sure the listeners have heard time and time again that if the company is not going to act on the feedback, then you shouldn't ask in the first place.
Don't even do it. Just don't even do it.
And I think making sure that based on the resources of that company, how many people they have that they can allocate to the closed loop process, and understanding how to do that. Those sometimes can be difficult conversations. Different people need to be involved, and having a standard operating procedure as it relates to closing the loop is important. And that's true, by the way, on a bottom up and a top down level. So bottom up is customer by customer, right? You identify a detractor through the survey, or you identify a customer who's frustrated for one reason or another. How do you close the loop with them and try to address their concerns? But on a top down basis, what are the systemic issues that are pervasive across a large segment of your customer population that if you move this lever, pull this lever, that'll affect in a positive way, the lion's share of your customer satisfaction. So those are some definite standard operating procedures. We also talk a lot about, and you've touched on this a few times, is how do you socialize this internally? How do you make it available to all of the different audiences that should be acting upon it? Of course, we believe that every department within an organization should have an appeal for or an excitement around the customer experience feedback, right? Because it affects obviously product, it affects marketing, it affects sales, it affects customer service and the leadership team, operations, it goes on and on, even human resources, procurement. You need to have a process in place to make sure that these insights are being disseminated widely, being socialized, being sort of discussed and root caused, if you will, so that every leader understands what the implications are for them as far as how to action these insights. So those are some of the things that we do. Of course, there are some companies that have much more formal process about how to the process improvement undertakings.
Sure.
And those are really important. How do you think about all of these data and sort of feeding this into the engine of improvements? Every company's working on their product roadmap or working on service delivery model or working on some investments that are going to improve the customer experience. But these insights have to feed into that, not operate in parallel. And so some companies that we work with are much better at having formal processes in place to enable that to happen. They're getting the reporting and analytics that we deliver, and it goes right into the process improvement undertaking or the operational improvement initiatives.
I love it. I think it's one of those things where it doesn't happen overnight either. I mean, these things take time, and depending on your business, your team, your executive leadership team, all of those variables come into play. There's no question about it. Evan, I'd love to dive into the fourth pillar of feedback, and I know we've already kind of hit on a bunch of different items around feedback, but I'd like to break this into like two different camps. Love to kind of hear for some of our listeners, they're thinking about how they can really try to be the best CX or CS leader within their business, within their company, within their team. I'd love for you to give them some ideas around some of the simplest things that they should focus on for the customer feedback side. And then I'd love for you to spend a minute or two talking about the employee feedback side, just some of the things that you've seen over your journey or some of the client work that you guys have done at Satrix Solutions that have really kind of enabled not only your team, but like your clients to get exceptional at what you just said, creating feedback loops, right? Collecting the information and then figuring out how you're going to actually take action on it and close the loop. Spend a few minutes talking about that feedback side.
Yeah, so we offer a number of different programs in the world of customer experience, voice of customer, as well as employee engagement. If you think about it, you can visualize the customer journey, for example, where you have the key touch points along the customer journey. First with sale, whether you win or lose a deal, then onboarding if it's one, then the ongoing engagement, renewal, obviously, potential upsell, cross-sell, and then hopefully in rare cases, churn. So you have the key touch points along the customer journey, and we work with our clients to stand up listening posts at each one of those. Now, we don't advocate, jumping into the deep end of the pool and trying to take on all of this at once. So to your question, we want to start small, and we want to make sure that we're adopting programs that are ones that we can execute on effectively. And so a lot of our clients are thinking about where they have the most pain or where they perceive the most value from these types of programs. And we'll obviously work with them on that. And they're saying, all right, let's start with a relationship survey with Net Promoter Score. And so that can be our North Star. That can be a KPI that we monitor over time. And I think that's one of the ways that you could start is, think about your audience, devise a very thoughtful and relevant 7 to 10 question survey that has likely to recommend Net Promoter Score embedded within it. Takes a minute for your customers to respond to, maybe 2 minutes. And then you can get your real finger on the pulse of customer sentiment. And then, maybe you're doing that semi-annually or twice a year. That's not a heavy lift for most companies. And that's a great way to get started and understand where your pain points lie, where your customer frustrations exist, where maybe the competitors are encroaching upon your business. So you can get a lot of insights just from a very well-designed and executed relationship survey that might include a KPI like Net Promoter or Customer Effort Score or overall satisfaction, things like that. And a lot of our other clients are coming to us and over time, building and establishing different listening posts at different stages of the customer journey. So sales win-loss interviews, customer advisory boards, post-onboarding surveys. So where you want to start is dependent upon your business and your unique set of challenges. But generally speaking, thinking about one of these VOC endeavors and doing it right, doing it very well. And similarly on the employee side, a lot of companies will start with employee Net Promoter Score or employee engagement survey. It might be semi-annual, might be annual, might be a pulse survey. But that's a good way to really just get that feedback loop flowing. Get the insights that you need to start thinking about the implications for your business and how you're going to orient an action based on what you learn.
I love that. I love that you bring up customer journey map right here, because honestly, not enough people talk about this, where if you plot out all the different things going on in your specific customer journey, not only do you see areas that are ripe for specific granular feedback, right? For example, how was the selling process? How was the onboarding process? How was the support you received? How was the retention and loyalty, right? That's how you get really dialed in on what people love about you and hate about you. One last thought that I'm thinking about, Evan, hearing you say, take the time to plot out the map, you see employee consternation inside of that. So when you're doing these journey maps, you can start to see at which points people internally get frustrated about it. Our product doesn't do this. Our internal tools don't do that, right? Or our processes aren't built for XYZ. Having those conversations is how you begin to build the first iteration of this stuff, right? So you literally are evolving and maturing and really kind of pushing the business into the future just by doing that. One last thought: some of the sharpest companies we've seen doing an incredible job on the customer feedback side. They literally have every piece of their feedback data. They know exactly where it lies within their customer journey. So to your point, from awareness, consideration, onboarding, all the way down the line to account management, loyalty, retention, you get to that level, guys, you have a really, really good sense for where your business is killing it and where you have to, shore some things up. But I love that idea. I love that notion. And for some of our friends out there that don't think customer journey mapping is helpful or valuable, Evan and I disagree with you. It can be such an easy way to kind of paint a picture and show everyone in the business really what's going on with the user journey or with the customer journey. So I love it.
Yeah. Well, and you hit on something else that I want to emphasize as well on the employee side. Employees want to have a voice just like your customers do, right? So getting that feedback, and a lot of the times employees have a really good sense of what your organization may be doing well or not doing well, right?
Yeah.
So we have a number of programs that we offer, like an employee opinion survey, for example, is a great program that, it's basically an electronic version of the suggestion box from back in the day.
Love it.
And it's just, hey guys, what do you think we're doing well? Where do you think we can improve? What obstacles do we put in front of you that prevent you from delivering an exceptional service experience to our customers? So asking them and giving them a voice is really key. And it also means, if you want to be excellent at service delivery and really differentiate based on the service experience, you got to start at home.
Yep.
right? You have to start by providing a good level of service to your internal constituents.
Yep.
And so how many times do we work at companies where you need support or assistance from a colleague, and or you have to go to procurement, or you have to go to HR, or you have to go to finance, and it takes weeks for them to get back to you, right? So that inherently is just going to frustrate the employee and then cause reverberations in the customer world as well. So thinking about your internal audiences and giving them a voice is very big on our part as well.
I love it. It's 100% spot on. And honestly, I really, truly believe, Evan, that the leading companies of tomorrow, they are going to be just more invested on the EX side than the CX side because of that reason, right? You have to have your EX game tight to be able to create world-class CX. It's as simple as that. Yeah. So, Evan, this has been an absolute pleasure. Before I let you go, where can people find out more about Satrix Solutions, and where can people get in touch with you, sir?
Yeah, CXChronicles.com is probably the easiest way to find us. We have a lot of great content, a lot of thought leadership, a lot of research reports and ebooks and things of that. So we really want to contribute to the community and help people be exceptional at customer experience and employee engagement, whether they work with us or not. So we offer just a lot of guidance and tips and best practice based on the things that we've learned. So SatrixSolutions.com. My email, Evan at Satrix Solutions, also on LinkedIn. And for those of you who are on Pavilion, that's another community that I'm a part of where a lot of sharing goes on.
Awesome.
So definitely can find me there as well.
That's fantastic. Well, Evan Klein, thank you so much for joining the CX Chronicles podcast. It's been our pleasure having you on the show, sir.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it, Adrian.